And stripes around here.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, greeting, friends. It's a great week to consider the celebration of our freedom, Independence Day, coming up tomorrow. And as we know, the cost of freedom is something that our forefathers definitely paid a huge price for. It's something that we oftentimes take for granted. I know I have many times in my life. Not only our nation's freedom for us to choose the direction we want to go in life, what we want to do, so many benefits to that, but also our personal freedom in that same light. And our country, I believe, society has really driven us to a place of comfort and convenience many times, and that provides a cost to us, I think, in maintaining our freedoms. It's a pleasure for me to have today with me one of my dear friends and mentors, Stephen Anderson. I've known Steve for, well, I'd say centuries, but that'd be too long. But it's been a great ride, Steve. Knowing for at least decades. Steve, for those of you who have not met him, it's going to be a real treat for you today for us to have this conversation. I'm looking forward to it. Steve's an internationally known business strategist, entrepreneur, author, in-demand speaker, and also really a strong philanthropist. Get that word out correctly. Steve is a visionary, and he's one that has given back in so many ways. We'll talk a little bit about that today. His mission is to energize growth and action in people's lives and their businesses. He's known for his innovative data-driven systems of communication to create profitable, positive service-focused organizations, many in leading healthcare practices and allied companies. Steve, I just want to jump into your vision at a very early age. And I know we've talked about, you've spoken many times at different events I've been to it with you, or where you presented, and talking about the round, I don't know if it's a round table or square table, but your family's table at home, and the conversations that came out, based on your parents, your father, an entrepreneur in his own right, and those conversations that you had instigated something in you that prompted you to, I would say, look at life maybe differently than the mainstream then, and maybe the way people look at it today. Talk a little bit about the vision that set you forward to your path, and we'll kind of take that forward and some of the things that you learned along the way.
Yeah, thank you, David, and thank you for the invitation to be here today.
My pleasure.
You know how much what I feel about you and what you do for everybody's financial freedom that you work with. So it's a privilege to be here. So yeah, let's go back to the round table, and it was round, David. There is there's one of my favorite quotes from Winston Churchill is he said, "We build our buildings and then our buildings build us." That's a paraphrase. But the structure, the physical structure and the environment has an influence on behavior. And I'm a big fan of round tables because they facilitate an equal exchange of the people around it. There's no hierarchy. There's no head of the table. There's kind of a balanced exchange. And I've noticed that we have a round table in our kitchen home, and we had a round table at our home when I was growing up. Now, I'm the last of 7 children. My dad affectionately referred to me as the bonus baby, so you know what was going on there. And he led one of the largest ad agencies in the Western United States his whole career. And we had some non-negotiables. A non-negotiable means you have no freedom. and so the non-negotiables growing up in our household, the household I grew up with was piano. Piano was a non-negotiable. So everybody played the piano. And it wasn't about, everybody took piano lessons, and it wasn't about the music. It was about discipline and accountability. The discipline to practice every day, and the accountability that once a week, every 7 days, we had to sit down with the piano teacher and account for what we had done during the week. Discipline and accountability.
So let me take that right there. Non-negotiables. discipline and accountability doesn't sound a whole lot like freedom to me.
And the lesson, and it didn't sound like that to me either. In fact, I carried that tradition on, with our children. And our second daughter, Abby, I'll never forget, she was 5 or 6 years old, sitting at the piano bench right over here.
There it is.
Just bawling her eyes out one day practicing. She goes, "I hate this. Why do you hate me? Why do you force me to do this?" And it wasn't force. It was about learning the lesson. Today, she's a singer-songwriter in Nashville, tours the country. One of the most beautiful pieces that she arranged was an arrangement of the Star Spangled Banner. But the lesson, and here's really the point, especially for the topic today: discipline and accountability. Freedom, I believe, is based on those two principles. The discipline, you take a look at the Constitution of our country, which was designed and built on a foundation of all men are created equal and everyone should be free. And that freedom is maintained by the discipline to abide by the principles that are in that document. And I think that's a lesson for life, is there is huge freedom within the bounds of being disciplined to follow the rules, follow what I call the natural laws that give us freedom. So discipline, and then responsibility. I believe that when there is agency, when there's freedom, then there's responsibility to use it wisely, judiciously, and for the benefit of others. So I didn't, of course, I realized that all in retrospect. I didn't realize it sitting at that piano bench every day during my childhood, but discipline and accountability. So that was one non-negotiable. The second non-negotiable was a paper route. So this was back in the day when the news was delivered either over the radio, the TV, or the daily newspaper. Some listening will remember those days. And so the distribution method at the time was young men, young women on bicycles delivering a paper route every day. And so that was the non-negotiable. Age 12, you got a paper route. And last of 7, so I had 3 older brothers. So we all had the same paper route. It just got handed down from one to the other, along with the vehicle, which was a 1960s purple Schwinn Stingray bicycle with the big Texas Longhorn handlebar.
Perfect bicycle for that.
Yeah, and in the day, it was like all the rage. I mean, I think Schwinn had nearly 70% of the bicycle market at that time. But that was a non-negotiable. And part of that was just, again, discipline and accountability, having to show up every day and be responsible for delivering on the promise. And the promise was papers on porches by 6 p.m. It was an afternoon newspaper, and 6 p.m. was every paper had to be on the porch by 6 p.m. So it was that learning responsibility and the discipline to execute on a daily basis. So the paper route was the second non-negotiable, and the third was scouting. So in our family, getting your Eagle Scout was the prerequisite to getting your driver's license. So for all the boys, for those that aren't familiar, the Eagle rank is the highest rank in scouting. And so the rule was you had to get your Eagle, and then you could get your driver's license. None of us ever dared test that rule, David. We took my parents' word for it that was the rule. And so we all did it, and for good reason. I mean, that whole process of, that whole merit badge process where you have to learn about, there's the merit citizenship in the nation and citizenship in the community and citizenship in the world, and all those lessons learned that I think were, in retrospect, foundational. That probably had a bigger impact on me than what I learned in school in terms of, overall long-term lessons. So those were the three non-negotiables. There were others, but those were kind of three that, really stood out: piano, paper route, and scouting. And there were conflicts from time to time between all those non-negotiables, but what it taught me early on, it's like you may say, well, what's the freedom in that if there's non-negotiables? Well, there are non-negotiables in life.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, if you want freedom and agency, then there's some non-negotiables. There's things you have to do if you want to be free. You have to be willing to obey certain natural laws, certain civil laws, if you want the freedom to be able to move around and freedom of choice and freedom to do the things you want to do. So I think that's one of the biggest misconstrued conceptions about freedom. Freedom's not, I can do whatever I want to do. Well, yes, you can. And if you cross the line, then there's a consequence. If you don't take responsibility, there's a consequence to that may limit your freedom. And so that, I think, helped set me on this path. I've been a student of what I call natural laws my whole life, just constantly looking for what are the truths about how everything works in business, in life, in society. What are the truths that run consistent? And when you understand the truths, the non-negotiables, then you can build a pretty amazing life based on those natural laws if you understand them and you abide by them. So, yeah, I think those were, again, reflectively, when I go back and look at some of those early experiences and what I extracted from them, taught me a lot about personal freedom, national freedom, financial freedom. I think one of the biggest lessons that I'm so grateful for is this was back. Do you remember back, David, in the day before lawn care companies and weed companies that would spray your yard?
Yeah.
So none of that existed.
Where were they back then? Right.
So one of my jobs was I had to dig up all the dandelions in our yard. And it was like a never ending. It was like, it just seemed like they just kept propagating. No matter how much you do it, they just keep coming up. I think I grew up with orange hands, and I hated that. I hated that stuff, but I did it. And as a result of it, what I learned was work ethic.
Yeah.
And one of the most valuable things is if you want the output, you got to be willing to do the input. So for those that are employers and those that, that interview people, one of my favorite interview questions is, how old were you when you had your first job out of the house? And what was it? How old? And there seems to be this direct correlation between the age at which you started to work, and work ethic. The earlier you started, then it just seems like there's a tendency there. And I think work and freedom are inseparably connected. There's exceptions to the rule, I think, but the harder you work, the more you focus, the more disciplined you are, then it just seems like there's more freedom, there's more choices that come out on the other end, the freedom to choose. And I think that's really the cornerstone of freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve, as you recount being the seventh in seven other brothers, I'm impressed. Number one, that your family, the culture driven by your parents, wasn't diluted as it went down to you. Because what I see oftentimes is that first child, or maybe the first two, the discipline and the accountability is really high. And then as more kids roll out, if that's the family, it's just like, okay, you're on your own, whatever you please. That didn't happen in your family. I'm very impressed.
No, David, it totally depends on who you ask. So if you were to ask some of my older brothers and sisters, oh, they would definitely say, Steve got it easy. He got a piece of cake, the whole deal. So it's all a matter of perspective.
But I can also see that maybe you're at a little bit of a disadvantage, even though it might have been an advantage, in that you didn't have anyone younger, junior to you, to pass on the paper out. I'm sure the seniors were like, hey, isn't it time for Steve to pick it up? Steve, baby, are you ready to go? We taking the training wheels off yet? Can you go yet?
Exactly. Yeah, they were looking for who to pass the baton to. So you're right. I was the end of the line. So yeah, I had to figure out what to do next after that. Nobody to hand it off to.
So another part of your story and your vision, and again, I would just have to say this all came from the vision that your family's culture painted for you, along with the discipline and accountability, but the vision to pursue what you wanted in life, and maybe not necessarily pursue it the same way everybody else was. And what I'm referring to is your travel down to Kerrville, Texas after graduation to the mentor, itsy bitsy Walter Haley. And many of us in my genre, know that story, actually been part of it. But talk a little bit about mentorship and what that obviously meant to you. But also you're doing the same thing, which we'll get to in a little bit, with obviously the clients you work with and their teams, but also with Eagle University. But how did that start? What were you thinking back then, and what were you pursuing when you made that put that knock on the door? Hey, Walter, I'm here. You don't really know me that well yet, but I'm here to serve. Let's figure it out.
Yeah. So that fact, your question, David, is what were you thinking? That a lot of people ask me that question, including my mother. So quick backstory. I went to the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. And one of the things I embarked on during my college experience was I started a chapter of Sigma Phi Epsilon fraternity. It's the largest fraternity in the country. And so I was one of the founders of that chapter. And as a part of our getting started, the national organization gave me the opportunity to go spend a weekend with one of their members of their board of trustees, who was here in Texas. His name was Walter Haley, very successful entrepreneur, and had a small group of people in his literally, David, and you remember this, in his living room. It was a big living room, but his ranch just outside of San Antonio, Texas, about an hour. And we had an amazing weekend together. There's about 30 of us, 35 of us from around the country, mostly business people and salespeople. And he just kind of mapped out his strategy for success and sales success. And at the end of that experience, he gave me a challenge, which was to go get a mentor. That was the challenge. A mentor, someone who was doing something that I felt I wanted to do, that was willing to share with me how they did it. And so it was kind of a fun idea. And so I went back and started on this quest to find this mentor. So I sat down with the first one and I learned so much. We just sat down for maybe 30 minutes and I, peppered him with questions, and I learned so much. I thought, man, I'm going to do that again. And then that one went really well. And then again and again and again. So I got on this path of just interviewing people that were doing things that sounded interesting to me. I was junior in college and hadn't quite figured out what I wanted to do. And so I think I did 60 of those, just 60 different people that were doing things that I thought I wanted to do. And I learned more from them that I'd learned my entire time in college. And one of the suggestions from one of those members, one of those mentors, because I asked him, I said, what would you do if you were starting all over again and you were my age? What would you do? What would you do differently? What would you do the same? And his response was, he said, I would go find somebody who's doing what I want to do, and I would figure out a way to go to work with them, because he said, you'll learn more as an apprentice.
Yes.
To coin a phrase.
The coin a phrase.
To coin a word, David. You'll learn more in a mentor-mentee relationship or an apprentice relationship than you'll learn from any management training program or any graduate school program. You'll learn more doing that than anything you could probably do. And so that resonated with me. That sounds like something I want to do. And so after I evaluated all the things that I'd run into, and it kind of came full circle, and I thought, I love entrepreneurship. I love the idea of running my own business, the whole deal. And I met a lot of people that are, have done that. And then I thought back to Walter, who had initially set me on this path. And I thought, I'm going to figure out a way for us to work together. And so this was, I don't know, maybe ill-advised, but it worked. We ran into each other at the fraternity convention, and we just had a short conversation. And he said, what have you been doing since I saw you last? And so I told him, I said, you gave me a challenge to get a mentor. I got 60. And he said, 60? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to come work with you. And it kind of took him back a little bit. And he goes, well, I'm not hiring. And I said, well, that's good, because I'm not for hire.
There you go.
He goes, well, what does that mean? And I said, you need my help. I said, you may not know you need my help, but you need my help. And so here's the deal. We're going to go to work together, and you don't have to pay me anything except for what I earn. And so on that basis, we started working together. And he was doing these, had started this little education seminar company. And so I just, I packed up and drove 1,200 miles to Kerrville, Texas, with no promise of anything. That's where I can still remember, David, my mother standing on the front porch, just shaking her head like, what are you thinking? You're going,
what happened? What happened?
Do what? Yeah. My dad was not real happy. David, he would call me every week with job interviews that he'd lined up to try and get me to reconsider. It's like, hey, I got somebody that I want you to interview with. And because he was sure I'd made a mistake. And so we went to work together, and I'll tell you the end of that story here in just a minute. But we worked together for about a year, and then put our business partnership together, which lasted 15 years until he passed away about 20 years ago. And it, that mentor advice that I got was spot on, which is we worked side by side. We had at one point we had 2 desks that were side by side. And one of the greatest compliments that I ever received in that relationship, and was one of the most instructional to me, was he came in one day upset. I don't know if I've ever told you this before.
I don't recall.
But he came in, he was pretty fired up. And he said, I've noticed something about you. I said, okay, what's that? And he goes, when I introduce you to one of my friends, after they talk to you, they don't want to talk to me anymore. And I just sat there, and he goes, you know why that is? And I said, well, I think I have a sneaking suspicion. I said, why do you think that is? He said, because you take better care of him than I do. They want to talk to you because they know you're going to follow up and do what you say, the whole deal. And he goes, you're better at it than I am. And he was faking the being upset part.
I got it. Yeah.
But the point was, to make the point. And man, I never forgot that. that, responsibility. There's that responsibility piece. Discipline and responsibility is like, it took me back to an experience I had with my uncle. I had an uncle, lived in LA, was one of Howard Hughes's right-hand people for decades, managed all of his real estate in Las Vegas. And he opened a lot of doors for me when I was interviewing mentors. He opened a lot of doors for people he knew in Los Angeles that I interviewed. And I was leaving one day from his house to go talk to one of his friends. And he turned to me and he said, "You realize that I'm opening up one of the most valuable things I have, which is all of my connections, to you." And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "I'm really grateful for it." And he goes, "Don't screw it up." And I made a decision, in that specific situation, that I was going to leave that relationship better than I found it. That, just by him doing me a favor, I wanted to make sure that every relationship that he introduced me to, that I left him in even a better light than maybe what impression they had of him before. And there's some ways I did that, but it just goes back to this whole discipline and responsibility is, they're in so many ways. You can just go back to that same that same formula. If you want great physical health, you got to be responsible for what you've been given, and you got to be disciplined to do the things, eat right, exercise, etc., in order to have the freedom to choose down the road. If you want financial freedom, you have to be responsible for what you've been given and disciplined in what you do in order to get a return. Discipline and responsibility. I mean, that simple formula all the way down the line. I don't think there's any area of life or in our existence where you can't go back to that simple formula and say, you know what, it's true with everything. You have to be responsible for what you have, and you have to be disciplined in how you manage it.
Yeah, very well said. Well, folks, if you're enjoying this conversation like I am, I always learn something from Steve. We've put together a resource package. There's no catch, there's no strings. If you just go to the URL there that's on the screen, it's celebrateFreedomWeek.com. We have a number of books and resources, including the book that really initiated the story that Steve just told us about, the bicycle and newspaper route, called The Bicycle Book. It's part of that package. One of the books and several books I've written, this one, Own Your Freedom, which is kind of applicable for this week, co-wrote with Dan Kennedy. But just a nice package, and we just want to put together as our gift to you. So just opt in. And one other thing, we're going to, my friend Alex on my team just said this morning, he said, well, why don't we actually, even for those who opt in for the resource package, we'll just create a raffle, and some lucky winner will have the opportunity to have a very comprehensive training piece that we have on alternative one-on-one investing, which is a lot of the key frameworks that we teach in Freedom Planner. So that's there for you. It's just our gift. Steve, I want to go back to the paper route just for a moment. So the discipline, the follow through, the integrity of doing what you say you're going to do, get those papers out by 6 p.m. My question to you is, did it ever happen where something didn't go right? Did you occasionally ever miss the front porch? Did something happen where you got a flat tire and you had to somehow limp through getting the job done? What just give me a piece of that, because I'm sure. In how many years did you run that paper out, by the way?
Probably from age 12 to probably the time I got my driver's license, probably 4 years.
Wow, so 4 years. So yeah, just I'd like to know a lesson learned from. Obviously, you're disciplined. You run the culture discipline. You're going to get it done, but sometimes things don't go the way we plan. So
yeah.
give me an
So I'll share 2 examples. One is one of my dad's rules was if you're going to the airport to catch a flight, you always leave enough time to get a flat tire.
There you go.
Now, you may never get a flat tire, but if you do, you'll still make it to the airport on time, right? That was kind of.
I just got to tell you, my wife lives very contemporaneously. She's not a fan of that at all. So I like your plan. She doesn't have a plan. We just have to cooperate in between. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, so that was the same rule on the paper route is you get it done early enough, you get started early enough that if in the unlikely event you get a flat tire or something comes up, you have enough time to repair and get back on the road and still deliver on time. And that is, expect the best and prepare for the worst. So many different examples of that. But that was one of the rules to live by. The other one, I mentioned occasionally there was a conflict between the non-negotiables, and one of those, the conflict between scouting and my paper route. So our scout troop would go on an overnight camp out every month. Now, this was in Utah, David. We went every month. It didn't matter. And some of the most memorable campouts were in December and January and February in the Uinta Mountains. So I got pictures of this stuff. So there was one, usually the routine was, since it was an afternoon paper, I'd hire one of my buddies to do the Friday delivery. And then we'd always be home Saturday in time to do the Saturday delivery. And so one particular month, we were coming back from, Saturday afternoon, we're coming back. There was weather, there was traffic. We got delayed and, clock's ticking, and we were not going to make it back on time. And this was before cell phones, before any of that. So there wasn't an easy way to communicate. And I couldn't, it was just a situation out of my control. So was what it was. And so I'm kind of anxious, and we're a few blocks away from the house, and I'm thinking, okay, I got to jump out. I got to get on it. Got to get this done, even though there's no way I'm going to be able to get it all done before 6 o'clock. So about 2 blocks away from the house, I'm in the back of the Jeep, my Scoutmaster's Jeep. And out of the corner of my eye, I see my purple Schwinn Stingray bicycle moving down the street. So I do a double take, and it's my dad on the bike. And this is not an adult size bike, David. I have one today.
Yeah.
I don't fit. So he's on the bike with the canvas bag slung over the handlebars, stuffed with newspapers. He's doing my route. He's throwing papers on the board. She's a horrible shot. Not even, if he stops and gets off the bike, it tips over. He goes over and puts the paper on the board. It was a mess. And I remember looking at that scene, and I remember thinking to myself, I'm 12, thinking to myself, that is so cool. Maybe most 12-year-old boys would be embarrassed that their dad was out doing their paper route. But what struck me was here was a guy at the time, David. He was CEO of the largest ad agency in the Western United States. He was chairman of the board of the children's hospital network in our community. He was president of the biggest publishing company in our town. Everybody knew Arthur S. Anderson. He was in the news all the time. Everybody knew who he was. And here he was on a Saturday afternoon on a bicycle way too small for him, doing a paper route.
I hope he got some press about that. Did anybody grab a picture?
It was awesome. And
wow.
The reason it made a difference for me is he had the account for the largest bank in our community. He had their advertising account. He did all their advertising for over 30 years. But early on in his relationship with them, he coined a phrase. It became their slogan. So it was the name of the bank, where people mean everything. So their whole deal was customer service. That was they put a stake in the ground on that. and it was on every brochure, every sign, everywhere. You never saw the name of the bank without that slogan that he designed. And it kind of became part of our family culture. I mean, we were all in bank ads as kids. Probably would violate every child labor law now, but we were in the ad. It was just, it just kind of became part of our family culture. And so the day when I saw him on that bike doing my route, it was the day that I realized that was not just a snappy slogan that the ad man dad came up with for the bank. It was, for him, it was a way of life. And that was the day I realized that to him, I was a people that meant something. I don't know. I mean, for him to be aware on a Saturday afternoon with everything he had going on, to be aware enough that I wasn't there, I wasn't back, something must have happened, and for him to pick up the slack for me and do something for me that I couldn't do for myself. Never forgot that. So yeah, things don't always go as planned. And but I took that as a really important lesson of the value of having and surrounding yourself with great people, with a team. He was part of my team. I didn't even realize it really, but he was part of my team, and he had my back. He was my wingman. I ride motorcycles, and a wingman's the guy who's always got your back. And but moving forward, I think that's one of the things in terms of freedom and agency and responsibility and discipline is having great people and choosing the people you associate with, you work with, is one of the greatest pieces of that whole freedom formula for me. Is I wish I would have realized that lesson earlier. Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great, he really promoted this concept that the who is more important than the what.
Right.
Who you choose to work with is more important than the job, more important than where you're going, because if you have the right people, it's like, look at the framers of the Constitution. Who sat in that room was everything, because they brought the ideas, they brought the experience, they brought the vision, all of those things they brought into that room. And absent those individuals, you would not have had the same document that we've now lived with for 250 years.
Wow.
That is framed out freedom.
Definitely the people. And that is, those are exactly the principles that you and Walter espoused for those many years that you worked together, and you continue to do so today with TOPS, with Keystone Management. And I also want to just dive a little bit into philanthropy and giving back and the mentorship that you provide. So one of many things you've done, but just through the Smiles for Life cohort out of the Crown Council, I don't know what the number is today, but I think it's like over $50 million, probably way over that now. But that you through your efforts and through the constituency that follow you and are believers have provided there. So philanthropy is huge. We can talk a little bit about philanthropy and what that provides for both the giver and the receiver, and then also the mentorship that you've taken what you've learned in life. And I have a same heart for this, but it's helping the next generation up. I mean, maybe we start with our kids and our family. That's a good place to start. But beyond that, what can we do as those who have gone through the life of many times hard knocks, but also the mentorship, the lessons that you brought out today that you've learned both from your family and through all the mentors that you sought out during those years and continue to do so, by the way. It's an always evolving process. We never quit. But talk a little bit about charitable giving, and then let's talk a little bit about Eagle University, which I'm a huge fan of.
So let me be clear on one thing here. I don't believe in giving back. That's a phrase that's crept into our vernacular. I don't know where it came from. I take exception to it. I don't believe in it because it implies, I think it sends the wrong message. If you're giving something back, it implies that you took something that didn't belong to you. I mean, I don't know about you, but growing up, that phrase was never a positive. Give that back to your brother. Give that back. It was always a negative. It's like, you took something that didn't belong to you. Now give it back.
I think I just overlooked that. I just went on my way. But, but well said. No, you're 100%
And
right.
so I think where it maybe came from is maybe this Puritan guilt complex that we've carried with us for 200 years of, the profit motive guilt. Is like, oh, it's bad to make a profit. Well, profit's what makes it all work. So instead of giving back, I believe in doing good. And there are so many things that we do that are a part of just everything we do that are doing good beyond just charitable things. I'll talk about that in a minute. But when, I challenge business owners to sit down and make a list of all the things they do in their business and their life that do good. You provide jobs for people. That's doing good. You're providing a service in the community. That's doing good. I mean, you go down the list of all the things you do good, plus all the things that you do from a charitable standpoint. So this goes back to the responsibility pillar, right? Discipline and responsibility. And I'm a big believer that, if you have been given something that you earned, you have a responsibility. We all have a responsibility to then do good with those assets, those experiences, to go out and do good, do something worthwhile and do good with that. So it may be that to me, just that change in definition, the difference between doing good and giving back. Giving back kind of implies, well, I can check that box. I gave something back. Versus doing good is a philosophy of life. It permeates everything that you do. So as one example of that is, the seed of an idea that came from Dr. Jeff Gray in San Diego, California. And Jeff and I have become really good friends. And this is just, to me, it's such a great example of responsibility and then a desire to do good. And Jeff, we were teaching one day, and we were doing one of our dental seminars, and he was part of our faculty. And he goes, I was just trying to find a way that I could do something to do good for, for the kids. They're affected by cancer, and every February is this Cancer Awareness Month. And he said, so I came up with this idea. And he goes, the idea is I'm just going to take all of my fees from whitening for the whole month of February, and I'm going to donate them. Just, any patient that comes in, they get their teeth whitened. I'll just take everything all those fees, and I'll donate it to charity. And then he said, and then I got thinking, what would happen if a bunch of us did that? Is not just me, but what if we took all the dentists in the Crown Council as an example, and we got everybody to do the same thing? So this idea started to build, and so then we called Dr. Bill Dorfman and Robert Heyman, who at the time owned, and they started and ran Discus Dental. They had a very popular whitening product, and so we called them out of the blue. They didn't even know who we were. And we told them our idea, and we said, look, would you guys be willing to sell us the whitening material at cost? Just offer it at cost as a donation to the cause. And they said, let us consider it. We'll call you back. Well, they called back same day. And they said, look, we cannot sell it to you at cost, but we will give it to you. And we'll throw in the shipping on top. David, I don't know that they didn't even ask how much. No, it's like, nor were there any limits. There was no, we'll donate up to this much, no limits, no boundaries. That first 90 days after we launched that, we raised $1.5 million in 90 days. We didn't even know what we were doing. And that relationship with Bill and Robert and Jessica Snell, that went on for 15 years until they sold the company. Millions and millions of dollars that they donated to do good, and thousands of dentists and dental teams that have continued that, that same effort every year. That's raised now over $50 million that's gone to children's and dental related charities. Ultradent now carries on the tradition. So Ultradent supplies all the whitening materials on the same basis. They donate all the materials and the shipping every year. It's an amazing effort, but it's just one example of doing good by just taking something that you do in the ordinary course of business and saying, you know what, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to do something good with this that'll make the world a better place. So that's just one example. And every year, we just finished the 2025 Smiles for Life campaign. It just ended on June 30th. We wrapped up the campaign, another hugely successful fundraising campaign. And that, it's in that same spirit, David, that that I love what we do at Eagle U. Eagle U was really the brainchild of a lot of the adults that had come through our training, who came to us and said, I wish I would have known this when I was, a kid in high school and college. And would you consider doing something like this for our kids and kids that age? And when that idea first came up, I thought it was a really bad idea. I just
how so?
David, do you want to be responsible for somebody else's teenager for a week? I just thought,
not personally, but if you surround yourself with the right people, which you've always done, magic.
Oh yeah, it was my first kind of just knee-jerk reaction is, ooh, I don't know that I want that responsibility. And we did. So we put together a great team, and we've been doing it ever since. And it's a nonprofit education foundation. We scholarship a lot of students that would never have the opportunity to experience the principles. And David, you're part of the faculty, so you teach some very, very important principles, but the whole basis of it is to put in the hands of high school and college students principles that will help them be free, is to be able to choose the career they want, to be able to choose the path they want, to be able to decide this is the kind of life I want, this is the kind of financial setup I want, and be able to choose and have the freedom, because it's based on principles, natural laws that when you understand them and when you work them with discipline, then everything tends to turn out better. It's no guarantee. Life's random. Life throws some crazy stuff. And when it's grounded and based on natural laws, then you have a much better chance of having the freedom to choose where you want to go and what you want to do. So it's one of my favorite things. It's the hardest work I do all year, and it's coming up. I'll be headed to Eagle U here next week. And David, I'll see you in 2 weeks because you're gonna help us wrap up the program. But for me, it's just one small way to do good, and I hope to make the world a better place by investing in young people in a small way, in a similar way that there were mentors who were willing to take a risk on me, to take the time to share with me their lessons that have had a huge, big impact on me.
Well, having had the privilege to be a participant for a number of years and seeing the entire curriculum and just being in the mix of those young people, and you see it from start to finish, of course, but when they first come in, it's many of them come not knowing what they signed up for, right? So, all right, I mean, for sure, and some are excited, and probably some are introverted and holding back. But I get to see, the inspiration, the aspirations, and the mentor roundtables or that we get to participate in are just amazing. And you and your team do such a great job of setting those principles in place and preparing these young people for what they're going to do next, and how to go out into the world, and how to approach the world, and how to find mentors, and just those basic skills that are so important and so fundamental that you don't get them anywhere else unless you were privileged to grow up in a family like the Anderson family. Not many do today. It's a different world, and I think just that opportunity to give back to that younger generation, because that's the legacy of our country. The ones that are coming up now are the leaders of tomorrow. So, yeah.
One of my favorite quotes that's attributed to Albert Einstein. You never know about these things in terms of where they really come from, but he's given credit for this one when he says, "If I, you know this one, if I have seen further, it's because I have stood on the shoulders of giants."
Yeah.
And that's really the whole mentor concept, right? Is sharing for the benefit of others, do good, and those things that get shared, those principles, are shared with the hope that it will help someone else have a higher level of freedom, agency, and ability to make good choices that will lead them in a direction that they want to go.
Well, it's a wonderful place for young people to be a part of. And Alex put up, he had up there, but eagleuniversity.org, if you're interested in learning more about it. If you know somebody, maybe somebody in your family, or you'd like to provide scholarship for this amazing organization that Steve and team have been facilitating for many years, that's there for you. There's the URL again. And then also, if you like the resource box that we put together, including Steve's book, The Bicycle Book, and some other resources, that's there for you too at celebratefreedomweek.com. Steve, it's always a privilege. I'm glad we had a chance to get together this week that we celebrate for our nation's freedom and independence, and I look forward to seeing you in just a couple of weeks.
Hey, likewise, David, thank you for your example and for your willingness to share, and for celebrating Freedom Week. I love this.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'll do one more tomorrow. Tomorrow at, I think, 12 noon Central as the time. So if you'd like to join us for that. But again, Stephen, thank you so much for your time today.
You bet. Thanks a lot.